Today we'll be working in my workbook called The Chronological Study of the End Times. And looking at the table of contents, we've already talked about rapture and how it matches really well to chapter 4 of Revelation. Then we talked about a number of items that should be in place before tribulation starts. I have of the belief that tribulation doesn't start right after rapture. There's about 3 to 5 years between the two because there's an item that starts tribulation. So these items, the League of 10 Nations, the rise of Babylon, the Gog and Magog war, and the one world religion, have to happen either between the two or just before rapture happens. Then we're starting to get into the seven seals. And the first thing we talked about in a prior video was the title deed to earth and who was worthy to take it. Then we talked about the four horsemen of the apocalypse and the first seal, which is the Antichrist. We talked about how you can just identify the Antichrist and all the various scriptures dealing with that. The last video I just did was on the peace treaty in Jerusalem temple being rebuilt. This all has to do before the second seal, I do believe. Peace treaty is what starts actually the tribulation. And that is the peace treaty between Israel and her enemies brought on by the Antichrist, the peace treaty. And then Jerusalem temple being rebuilt. It has to be rebuilt before the mid-trib. So either it's rebuilt here or start to be rebuilt here, these things, okay? The reason why I didn't have the Jewish temple being rebuilt during tribulation is I really believe it has to do with the peace treaty being signed for it to be finished or to be worked on in earnest. Anyway, this video will be on the second and third seals, okay? The second seal is opened, which is war. Despite the Antichrist being accepted by many, the League of 10 Nations is not content, and war breaks out as bigger countries try to gain control over smaller nations or to obtain land from one another. This is literally World War III. So again, in our graph, we're in tribulation. The Jewish temple was rebuilt, and now we're in war, which I spelled war wrong. Sorry about that. So, main scripture is Revelation 6, 3 through 4. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come and see." Another horse, fiery red, went out, and it was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and the people should kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. A related scripture is Matthew 24, 6 through 7. Jesus said, "And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places." So what seal is this? This is the second seal. Who said, "Come and see"? The second living creature. What color was the horse? Red. It was, let's see. It was granted to the one who sat on it to take peace from the earth, and the people to take peace from the earth. And that people will kill one another, and there was given to him a great sword. What does Jesus say must come to pass? Wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Question and possible answers. Who's involved in this war? It will seem that the whole world is involved in this war, as the phrase, "take peace from the earth," does not specify a specific area. We already have the 10 kings or leaders of the world. So is this a war between them or a war from other areas of the world fighting for their own control? There's no way to know for sure, but it is pretty clear that the cost of this war will take precedence over anything else based on the third and fourth horses of the apocalypse. Why is this not the Gog and Magog war? Many Bible scholars have placed the Gog and Magog war here, believing that since the Gog and Magog war is a great future war, and the second seal is great future war, that they have to be the same great war. They point to the phrase, take peace from the earth, as similar to the Israel being a peaceful people who dwell safely. Also, when Gog army attempts to attack and the people kill one another, similar to every man's sword will be against his brother. The biggest problem with this connection is that God's invasion never takes the peace from Israel, as God demolishes them before they attack. Therefore, there's never an actual war. The second seal is a war, not a war that never happens, but a war that actually happens globally. Also, the war of the second seal takes peace from the whole earth, not just one spot. Why is this not Psalm 83 war? Many Bible scholars believe that Psalm 83 points to a war to come between Israel and her surrounding neighbors. The problem again is Psalm 83 war is a local war and not a world war. Although it's hard to tell when Psalm 83 war is, it does seem to fit well before the Gog and Magog war, as Israel is a land of peaceful people at the start of Gog's attack. Whether the Psalm 83 war is before or directly after rapture is unclear. Is this world war talked about in the Bible? It would seem that a war this big would be prophesied by the prophets of old, and it is possible, as there are many wars talked about in the Bible that have not yet happened. Some would argue that the First and Second World Wars were not described in the Bible, so there's no need for this world war to be prophesied about. However, the difference is that Israel was not a nation in the first two wars, and all events of tribulation center around Israel. The problem is which massive world war prophesied in the Bible is about the world war versus the war of Armageddon, both of which will include all the nations. Do 3 nations fall in this war to the Antichrist? There are scriptures that tell us that 3 of the League of 10 nations will fall by the Antichrist. Daniel 7:8. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in the horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Daniel 7:24. The 10 horns are the 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. Do these 3 nations fall during the seal? Possibly. Or the 3 kings were part of the Gog and Magog war, and they fell then, which gives rise to the Antichrist. Is this war just around Israel, since tribulation centers around Israel, or does it involve the whole world? Why do you think that? Because it says takes peace from the earth, doesn't take peace from Israel. Would this war be prophesied about in the Bible? I don't know. I think in the fact that it's already prophesied in Revelation is prophesied. I don't know. So now we're going to do the third seal. Again, this happens after the start of tribulation. The main scripture is Revelation 6:5-6. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, and a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Matthew 24:7. For the nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. What seal is opened? The third seal. Who said, "Come and see"? The third living creature. What color was the horse? Black horse. What did the rider have on his hand? In his hand, a pair of scales. Who spoke next? A voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures. A quart of wheat for denarius, 3 quarts of barley for denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Jesus said there will be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in various places. Can we identify the voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures? This voice is most likely Jesus, as he's in the midst of the throne. Remember Revelation 5:6, and I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and the 4 living creatures, in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out unto the earth. Also, he is the one who took the scroll and is opening the seal. What does it mean that wheat and barley will cost a lot, but not the oil and wine? Some Bible scholars point to the type of food shown as the difference between necessary and luxury items. That is, the poor will need wheat and barley to make their bread, at least the price of oil will not be affected, and the price of these items will equal a days of their wages, whereas the oil and especially the wine are more luxury items used by the wealthy, and the price of them will not be affected. Therefore, the wealthy are immune from the pain of this famine. Now, if the wealthy would share their good fortune with those that are not so fortunate, then this judgment would not be so strong. But the color of the horse indicates this does not happen. Throughout tribulation, we have an indication that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Other Bible scholars believe that the difference in the price indicates a partial famine, that some food items will be outrageous in their prices, whereas other items will be normal in price. That, rather than judgment, this seal is more of an inconvenience, making bread items outrageously high, but little else is affected. The problem with this is the color of the horse and what the rider has in his hand. Being a black horse with scales in the rider's hand indicates a more harsh judgment than a partial famine. We also know this is the result of the World War, which probably devastated the food crops and the import-export of foodstuffs. Who is the voice in the midst of the four living creatures? Well, Jesus is in the middle of there, so it seems logical that he would be the voice. What does it mean that wheat and barley would cost a lot, but not the oil and wine? Again, I do think it has to do with the rich take care of themselves and the poor have to struggle. So that's the end of CL2 and 3. 2 and 3. Yes, 2 and 3. And so that's the end of this video. The next video, I'm sure, will be 4, and 4, maybe 5. I don't know. Anyway, you have a great and wonderful day. Bye now.